Every time that this parable comes up, I think we often ask in our mind, where are we in this parable? What seed are we? Are that seed that fell on ground and sprang up and is on fire for our faith, but have let it fall to the wayside? Are we that seed that's bearing fruit? Of course, that's what we want to be, right? But more than likely, what we all pretty much fall into is we're seed among the thorns. We're seed among thorns that are trying to choke the fruit out. And why? Because, well, we live in this world. And this world has many temptations. And so what we need to do is realize, where are those thorns in our life? Where are those thorns in our life that are prohibiting us from going deeper with God? Of course, Jesus speaks all about parables today. He says, what's the point of parables? To get the message across. And he uses, of course, the parable of the sower and the seed. Today I'd like to use the parable of a garden. Although I'll put this out right away. I don't know how to garden at all. I figured this out, by the way, a couple years ago. You see, a couple years ago, we decided as a parish to buy a rectory, to buy a house where the priests can live. And so that's where I live. It was actually built by a parishioner, a Kerber. Imagine that, a Kerber building a house around here, right? I know it's unheard of, but it's beautiful there as well. And so Mrs. Kerber lived here for a long time. Eventually other owners came, and I guess everyone tells me they had the most beautiful gardens in the neighborhood, right there off of the corner of Apple and Mill Street. It's so close, by the way, that often I'll walk home and say, oh, my vehicle's still back here at the office. That's always an embarrassing walk back to the office through the staff and them laughing at me. But it is a beautiful property right there on the corner. Now, the owners before we had it, unfortunately, did not do a very good job at landscaping, although right before we bought the house, they kind of spruced it up a little bit. And so it's been 2 years since we had that house. I remember when we bought that house, it was almost exactly 2 years ago, and I had such great intentions to become a gardener. I mean, I was dreaming, this is what I can do. It'll get me out of the office to go and plant plants and weed and buy plants. And that just sounds like a lot of time, is what it eventually came to. So I never quite made it to the garden patch. I think I bought a gift certificate, but I still have to use it as well. But I never quite got there. Now, of course, I've been told this many times now over the last 2 years, that I have neglected the gardens. Because every single week someone comes up and says, Father, is that your house down there? I go, well, technically it's the parish's house. It's not my house, but it's the house that I live in at the rectory. And they go, boy, that garden looks horrible. All right, sounds good. So you want to go ahead and garden for me? Then they walk away. So maybe that's just the point of the homily. We need gardeners for the rectory. But it could be potentially a beautiful garden, but of course the main thing that has to happen is someone has to care, first off, and someone has to spend the time there. It's like any garden. I remember as a child, my mom was always in charge of the garden. The boys were in charge of mowing the lawn and making sure not to mow through the garden. My sister did that one time. That was the last time she ever mowed the lawn. I think she did it on purpose. But I remember my mom spending time going to Gerton's and buying the plants. And then every single week, she continued to be out there. Because you can't just plant and walk away. See, that'd be like us just being baptized and walking away. We have good soil. We know our soul is potential of being good soil. God created us. God made us. But it can't just be a one-time thing. Imagine if your garden was only planted once, you never looked at it again. It would look like my garden. Horrible. And this is the same with our soul as well. And so what do we need to do for our soul? The same thing a gardener does. Every single week, looking and saying, where are the weeds springing up? What do I need to remove to make my soul more beautiful? What plant has the potential of dying this week that needs extra care, extra love? You see this sometimes in some gardens. They have all these different sticks and mechanisms to make the plants grow because they know that they're suffering. What fence do I need to put up around my garden to keep those pesky deer away? In our own life, what walls do we need to put up to keep those temptations away? This is what we need to do. Just like we heard last week as well. What are we attaching ourselves to? Now, of course, if we have weeds in our soul, we need to pull those out, and that can be painful sometimes. It's painful when we're pulling something away that we're attached to. But if it's not from God, and it's not producing fruit, then we know we must do this. And why? Because we want to receive our eternal reward, yes, and we also want to produce fruit, 160 and 30-fold. We have a beautiful second reading today from the letter of St. Paul to the Romans, chapter 8, verse 18, is one of my favorite verses. It states, "Brothers and sisters, I consider that the sufferings of this present time are as nothing compared with the glory to be revealed for us." These sufferings that we may be enduring, these pains that it takes to pull out some of these weeds, some of these sins in our life, are nothing compared to the glory to be revealed for us. So let's persevere in our faith. Not just plant, not just look at our garden every once in a while, but look at our soul all the time. Persevere, remove what needs to be removed, and bear that fruit that God wants to bear in us.